How do you make someone connect with a character? How do you make someone that is engrossed in a work of art feel the way a character feels? Other older visual mediums like movies have been doing this for ages, and many modern filmmakers are masters of using framing, camera work, and many other clever techniques to convey emotional state. But video games, by their very nature, are playable entities and so provide an extra layer of agency for people to connect with, and therefore can use elements like music or level design to engage people to the point that the game leaves a lasting emotional impression. One of my favorite examples is the very first 3D Zelda game, Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time is well regarded for many reasons, more than I can enumerate without derailing this whole video, but one of those is how it fantastically used the jump to 3D environments to provide a strong sense of ambience to most of its areas. For example, while in previous 2D Zelda games dungeons might be very well designed, they all follow a similar visual uniformity and therefore had a very similar feeling between each other. Jump then to something like the Forest Temple in Ocarina of Time, and now everything from the architecture to the use of lights to the creepy music provides a strong feeling of a ruined structure hidden in the woods, haunted by some invisible danger. This use of ambience as a resource is extended to the storytelling. Storytelling in Zelda games has always been really tricky. The Nintendo design philosophy dictates that the game feel and the mechanical ideas go first, and then the story is designed around it. So whoever is in charge of the plot has the challenge of creating a compelling story around an existing gameplay structure. This causes some larger issues, such as the difficulties in keeping a cohesive timeline when lore keeping is just not as much as a priority, but years of iteration has led to stuff like Breath of the Wild, which embraces its plot solution to a non-linear game fantastically, but that is a topic for another day. Back to Ocarina of Time. One of its most emblematic features is playing both as Child Link and Adult Link after he travels to the future. By all accounts, this is an element that was added surprisingly late in development. Ocarina of Time had what was at the time a very long development cycle, which is pretty justifiable when you consider just how much of its ideas had to build from the ground up with very little reference. But Miyamoto's sudden desire to have both Child and Adult Link playable must have felt like an extraordinarily daunting task so close to the release. From a technical and design perspective, the Zelda team took all sorts of clever shortcuts to achieve this. Most animations are reused between both Adult and Child Link with no difference, and while the world of Young Link and Adult Link should be massively different in terms of plot, in practice remarkably little changes. Most towns use the same music and just shift NPCs and dialogue around, occasionally adding a new building at best. Places like Sora's domain are just frozen, with almost all NPCs removed, which can never be fixed. Not even the music changes, which no longer fits the ambience of a desolated domain. All of these examples are likely victims of developers trying to implement this radical change in what was likely an already very advanced project. However, when you zero in on the things that do change between the world of Child Link and Adult Link, the few places where they explicitly chose to put their limited time and resources to differentiate them, some interesting observations emerge. The Zelda team now has a complicated challenge from a plot perspective. What kind of message or emotion can you tell in a story that requires the protagonist to travel forward in time and suddenly become an adult? The answer they found is quite interesting, and I will argue it revolves around the idea of the horror of growing up. Ocarina of Time, like most traditionally structured Zelda games, is a hero awakening story, with a young, unexperienced protagonist moving into a wider world and being involved with events on an epic scale. This is strongly reflected in the inviting theme that plays on the overworld. Everything the player is presented in the first act of the game reinforces this idea. Link is sent on a quest to meet the Princess of Destiny, and she tasks him with a collection of spiritual stones to secure the sacred Triforce before the evil Ganondorf. On this quest, Link travels the world solving problems created by Ganondorf and making friends and allies from different races of Hyrule. It is the sort of thing you came to expect from such a story. The twist happens in the second act as Link gets ready to open the door of time and finally fulfill the objective. The Master Sword is presented as a legendary blade, a great weapon to increase our power and reward the player for their quest. Up to this point, this closely mirrors the structure of the journey of the hero in A Link to the Past. But as soon as the player pulls out the sword, the first twist is unveiled. The whole thing had been a trick. Ganondorf was aware of Link's actions and was banking on him finding all the spiritual stones so he could open the door for him and then steal the Triforce. Rather than framing Link traveling to the future to become an adult as a power increase or an acquisition of maturity, Ocarina of Time chooses to frame this event as a tragedy. Link is forced to become an adult as a result of a ruse by Ganondorf that allows him to become a literal Dark Lord that subjugates the land to his will. While the journey of Child Link is a misguided attempt at preventing Ganondorf's rise to power, Adult Link's journey is a struggle to take Ganondorf down from a position of power that Link himself enabled. It's pretty bold for a Zelda game at the time. But the interesting thing is how the game uses two specific areas to sell players on the idea of the loss of innocence and naiveness of childhood, and both are present very near the start of the second act of the game. Let's start with my favorite, Hyrule Town. Hyrule Town is introduced to the player soon after the first dungeon. By this point in the game, most players will be familiar with Kokiri Forest and a bit with Hyrule Field, with its heroic theme but a bit of empty big space. The town market is an immediate differentiator. Never before is Link exposed to such variety of color, to such upbeat music, to so many characters in one place, to so much movement. Everything in this area is meant to cause a strong impression in the player. The marketplace is the embodiment of that brave new world that was waiting for Link outside the confinement of the forest, and there are few places in the game that are likely to cause such a specific impression. Other towns, such as Kakariko Village, use much slower and calmer music, so for the rest of the game, when they think of how alive Hyrule is, they're probably going to think of the town market. Which is why it is an absolute genius move that it is the first place Adult Link finds when exiting the Temple of Time, and it looks like this. I still clearly remember the shock this generated in me as a kid when I first arrived at this part of the game. A lot of effort went into this one moment of the game. Gone is the upbeat music, replaced with just the sound of howling wind. Gone are all the lively characters, replaced with what is universally regarded as this franchise's most terrifying enemy, literally undead. This area serves no other practical purpose. Its idea, all of it, serves to this moment. The first thing the player encounters after growing up isn't framed as progress, it is framed as defeat and loss. The second more subtle moment that I think ends up cementing this idea is Kokiri Forest. I made an entire video on this first area of the game and how it serves as a safe area for players to get acquainted with the paradigm of 3D control. The nature of Kokiri Forest as a safe haven comes mostly from an utility standpoint, as most tutorial areas do. The interesting part here is how the game subverts this when Link returns as an adult. Kokiri Forest is one of the first areas the player needs to revisit after becoming an adult, as it is on the road to the Forest Temple. While it is not as changed as the marketplace, its role as a safe space for learning is quickly subverting by now it being filled with monsters. Even the unchanged theme of the forest does not get a full chance for an intro before being cut off by an enemy combat theme right at the start. This game is darker in more places than people give it credit for. While the themes of a lost past wouldn't be fully explored until much later in the franchise, I always had an appreciation by how Zelda games work within their limitations of their design to deliver some truly shocking moments. What about you? Did any of these moments leave an impression when you first played the game? Let me know in comments, and as usual, thank you for watching.